Let's just give due diligence a chance and see if we can do that, but I don't believe that's going to work because we've always got this bit here, and I think the main lead walks across the entire thing. There's too much interference from the wall, and we don't really want, you know, big noisy bits of the wall. There's a big noisy bit here, which is the same as the hair, and it's all down to the way in which this scene has been exposed and the way in which the lighting has fallen, which is unfortunate. So we're not going to get our color separation here. That's not going to happen. So what we have to do is take our next scene into account, and we don't have to give it the same, you know, steely green teal background. What we want to do is we want to keep this general kind of distribution of contrast and this kind of treatment of detail, and we want to try and give that, we want to try and kind of apply that here. So we don't need it to be blue and yellow, but what we do want is for this kind of general contrast and this kind of level of saturation and this kind of washed out steely, slightly, you know, this very forlorn kind of a look is something we want to try and impose here. So we've got a decent enough starting point here. I'm going to get rid of this node. In fact, I'm just going to reset the key because nothing else has happened. And what we can do is we can take a look at some of our other shots. Now, I'm not going to put the yellow from this onto here because it's not a day for night. But this kind of, you know, distribution of light value, this distribution of contrast is something that we could go for. And it's something that might work. We need to be careful of losing the sweaters and the jacket. They're the two darkest things in the image right now. So we'll just see how far we can take this. And it may well be that we don't actually have a 100% highlight in this one, which would be okay. And when secondaries are impossible, you have to use your primary tools. This often means that when you get into the right headspace, these difficult shots can be a bit faster to work on than some shot which gives you so many opportunities because it's come out really nicely. It's always the way. It's lots of times I think, you know, I get to a location and I think, oh god, this is going to be so difficult to grade, and then actually, oh, I can't do any secondaries, so it's just primaries. So it once you realize that, once you accept that, it becomes simpler. I still like to have some decent highlights in there, but maybe not 100%. I'm just going to bring that down, And we do just want to preserve the kind of bluey qualities here. Maybe that's a bit much. But going from here to here, we accept that the room is a different color, that everything's different, but it is, nevertheless, using the right click instead of the double click this morning because I don't know why. It is nevertheless a similar kind of atmosphere. You see how the light is now falling in a similar fashion? We don't quite have the same model, and the shot itself isn't as sharp. We might try a little bit of sharpening on this shot, and we might just try and tease a bit more detail out with either a curve or the log wheels, but it's getting there. Still, it's a little bit magenta, which bugs me, but that's getting better. Now we've got more kind of a black and white thing. So now let's see if we can tease a bit more detail out of this shot, because it's a little bit blurry, and it's not too focused. It's blurry in the foreground here. So what we can then do, let's blur, let's sharpen. We always use a very, very light touch when we sharpen, because obviously you start getting these crazy halos, which are no good. And there are other tricks to sharpening as well, but we'll go over those in the advanced node tree section later on in the course. And I want my sharpening to be no lower than 0.42, 0.41, because I'm already beginning to get halos here. If it goes any further, you just get halos and it looks awful. So I'm going to say probably 0.47. And that's a small but significant difference here. Cool. Okay, the reason I'm checking this through is because this bright part here, I've looked at that for quite a long time, and I now have a green stripe on my eye that's moving around as I look, and it's landed on the main lead's hair, and I just want to make sure that that green stripe is an artifact of my own eyes and not actually in the footage. keep an eye on that. If you look at a bright feature for a very long time, you kind of carry an imprint of it around for like up to a minute afterwards, and that can lead you to think, oh, there's a weird green splash on the hair here. Actually, there isn't. Actually, it's just because I've slightly dazzled myself looking at this bright region. I'm then transferring that kind of dazzled spot on my eye onto the hair. Cool, that looks good to me. It's now in keeping with this atmosphere. It looks like part of the same project. So that's fine. I am now happy to call that look done, and I will transfer that onto the other shots. That toaster probably needs a little bit more blue. It's coming out a little bit yellow to begin with. And that's more like it. This originally being a student project, this logo here is not too important. Later on, if it were to be if it were to be submitted to festivals, then we'd probably go into VFX and clone out this logo, but we're not going to worry about that too much for now. Other brands of toaster do in fact exist. Not that this is the BBC. Okay, we can probably get quite far. In fact, I quite like that. That's very good. This is all the same location, the same lighting, and the same time, so we can quite safely copy that through. In fact, I've completely ignored the fact that they're grouped. It's early in the morning. And what we'll then do is we'll just copy-paste that look into the group pre-clip. There we go. And then from there to there, we have the same kind of atmosphere. This might be a little bit dull, so what I might do is I might just go back in and I might just add a little bit more highlight here, because we don't have those bright backlights as we like we do in the previous shots. I just bring that down a smidge, and that's much better, and that now edits together much more nicely. Cool. First pass, I'm happy here. Second and third pass, it's likely not to change too much because, you know, outside of vignettes and everything, secondaries aren't really going to do anything here. The walls and the skin are too similar, but that's in a good position now. So we're getting on. We're getting there, and we've got this sequence to come, and we're going to do the woods. We're going to leave the woods to last because they're awkward, and we've abandoned our first look, which is fine. Every now and again in look development, something's a bit awkward and like you go down the wrong route, and it's the skill is in recognizing, okay, I'm putting a lot of time into this and it's not really producing a result. Rather than try and kind of hammer it into a shape which it is not, why don't I try a different approach and see if I can get something more out of it? And in this case, we're just going, okay, fine, we've tried this approach, it's not working. Rather than waste loads more time going after the same thing, we're gonna try a different approach. But we will come to that last, because we're going to go through like another mini look development phase doing this. So that means we're now onto the final exam sequence and the interrogation sequence. This shot was very difficult, and we can get a very nice kind of thriller-esque look here, but we don't quite get the separation between skin and wall that we did last time. In fact, that's pretty good. In fact, that's very good. That's easier than I remember. I spent a lot of time rotoscoping this shot in the real grade. There's a little bit of spill in the hair when it hits a highlight, but we'll come back to that. So we're now in this area, in the interrogation sequence. Now we've already taken care of this look. We've got our parallels here, taking care of the purple and the brighter colours. I've split this recording over 2 days if you're wondering why I'm behaving a little bit differently now. And then the next one, we have our layer and we have our skin, and then our final contrast adjustments to bring it all in line with our original reference from the Brombrone Bridge, and I think that's actually quite a good lookalike given the location we've got. Cool. So, what we can now do is we can take a look at applying this to the rest of the sequence. Now, this should be fairly stable. Like I said, the advantage of this project is we've got a lot of very controlled lighting. We have a lot of scenes which, you know, it's all the same location, same lighting, same time. Some more complex projects might actually come back at different days to finish off a shoot, in which case the light is totally different. Every now and again a light breaks down, not very common, but does happen. So first off, we'll go through the wides. And we're going to add our look there. And it looks like this wasn't actually placed in the correct group, so I'm going to rectify that. I'm now going to go group, add into current group. There we go. And now the wide, mid-wide, medium-wide. Mid shots are taken care of. I just need to be careful that it is actually valid throughout. Okay, we do have some noise in the hair there, so we can try and refine that. Okay, so we've fixed that there. We can just go through and proof check it on other shots. Looking through this now, I'm quite happy. At first pass, it's fine. We'll go through this in more depth later on in the second and third pass and make sure that everything is okay with these angles, but they're looking quite good now. So then what we will do is we're going to go through... Okay, that's in the wrong group. I have put these in the wrong group. I'll just put these in the right group. Okay, so we can see what we think about copying and pasting a look over. It doesn't appear to work that well. We've got kind of splotches in the skin which aren't being keyed. We've got the hair which is not cooperating. This actually looks like a better key to me. Still little bits in the hair which are problematic. If we take a look, ever so slightly. But what we can then do is we can take this look and build on it and make it a much better fit for this one. So in this case, we probably want to undo the color balance, make it a little bit yellower, and we'll also bring it down a bit. And here we just want to go for a slightly more teal green look. Just need to use a gentle touch here because it can very quickly go overboard. And that's beginning to look good. Our skin's still a touch pink. Just need to add a bit more yellow to it. Leach the colour away ever so slightly. Now, we had a little bit of an issue with our hair, so we just need to try and... There we go. And we'll bring the shadows down a smidge as well. And that looks pretty solid to me if I check it through. Let's see, it might be a few more, yeah, there's little bits here, so we can just go through. Change that to closing, maybe one iteration plus, and we might just blur it out just a little bit more, hide the seams. That now looks pretty good and pretty stable to me, and it looks like a fairly good match. We'll go back and finesse the match in the second pass, but for first pass, that's a lot better. So I'm happy with that. I'm now going to save because we've been working for a while. Yes, you can see the difference we make. So we are now beginning to get there. I think we've mainly got the close-up of the detective in this scene, then we've got a few flashbacks. And I've got the pop shield of the microphone right up my nose when I record this, so it's making me itch. Give me 1 second. Cool, so let's see how we go with the close-up of this actor who I recognise because 6 years ago, back when I was in university, I'm pretty sure he starred in one of my student films. 7 years ago, 6.5 years ago when I was in university. I don't know, I feel old now. And we've got two fairly good looks we can just slap on there. This one is quite good. He's a lot easier to key. His skin isn't as fair and not as pale as the main leads. So we can give that a go. We don't need this parallel stack because we've got no purple in here. And this is one of the real advantages of having such a kind of deep learning development, look development phase. And I might just bring our mids down a bit more. Highlights up, get that kind of low-key contrast, and we just need to make sure he's not too saturated or lively. And I'm talking very, very quietly now for no reason. So now let's just proof check that key. Okay, a little bit in there. What we can do is we can denoise our key. And that looks fine to me. We'll come back and we'll do that in more detail in the second pass, but that is looking good. So that's the interrogation scene, largely taken care of. At least it will be when I put it in the right group. Give me a second. There we go. Now, that's the interrogation scene, largely taken care of. At least it is for first pass. We've got a few flashbacks. And flashbacks are all from previous scenes. So we'll be able to copy and paste directly onto them. This is one which is a bit different. This is another one, and obviously we want to be very careful about the key here, but it should be fairly simple. And that's fine. And that's more or less the same shot, which is okay. Now, in the real grade, I had to take these pink bits of tape and make them grey. I'm not going to do that this time because I like the kind of magenta cutting through the cyan wash over the whole thing. I think that's quite effective visually. The director didn't like that and I had to change that, but if left to me, I would have left it like that, so we're going to. Cool, so we'll go through this in more detail in second pass, but I think that's there for first pass now. So what we've got are the examination, or as the exam scene. And this shot is quite difficult. It took quite a lot of work. But it does look quite simple this time around. Although it's not quite as, this grade isn't in as, this grade is not in as much detail as the real one I turned around. Right, so that's going to be the hardest shot to deal with in this sequence. We'll deal with that one last. And we'll go through the exam shot. So the exam shots, they don't have to be identical to this, but they do have to have the same kind of atmosphere. They have to have the same kind of feel. So what we can do is we can cycle through what we've got. That clearly isn't very good. That's getting in the right direction, but it's probably a little bit too dark. This is before we realise what's actually gone wrong. So once we're in here, once the detective has turned up, essentially, we can justify this very dark feel, because obviously something really unpleasant is going to happen. This is before the penny actually drops, if you will, so this needs to be a little bit brighter, a little bit kind of more standard. It needs to be in keeping with the rest of the film, but it needs to have a brighter feel. And we need to watch out, let's just apply this for a second. We need to watch out for these two spots here, which is when the practical lights in the room are striking the wall. They're quite close up there, and they're going to make these two bright spots, so we need to be careful with these two. We're going to do a look from scratch here. We're not going to copy and paste. We're going to keep our highlights around 640. And look at this again, it's gone purple. And this is actually looking all right to me already. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to do loads and loads of work, like I've said before. You don't have to stress out if your node trees aren't looking like this. Whatever is appropriate is appropriate. So if you find that something is responding a little bit more easily to the grade, don't worry about that. No one's going to accuse you of being a fraud for doing that. In fact, a lot of DOPs quite like to see that. Okay, as we pull that down, some of the skin tones go a little bit odd, so we just need to be careful. I'm going to pull a little bit of saturation out of the shadows just to compensate. There we go. That's cool. As that comes through, that's actually looking pretty good. So what we might just do to that afterwards is add a little bit of a cyan tinge. Again, we don't want to go crazy. It doesn't have to be a dead ringer for the scene. And we're going to make sure that we keep our shadows where they belong. Maybe just a little bit more in the way of highlights and a little bit cleaner. And there we go. So I'd say this is probably appropriate. It then leads into this sequence. And whilst this is different to this, we have that kind of logical progression. We have something that's a little bit brighter. We've maintained our kind of original bleak feel, but it's a little bit brighter here because it's not immediately apparent that something horrible is about to happen. That's only clear once the detective comes in and our main lead is then escorted out of the classroom. And we have a missed edit here, so we're going to fix that. Just go back to the edit timeline. And we're just going to use the razor to cut that there. And this is where we can start to bring things down. This is when things get really bleak. This is when whatever nefarious plan the other girl has had is coming to a head for our main character. A little bit of a blue gap in the hair there, but we will fix that up in the second pass. So back to this sequence again. We can do that. That I like. It's a little bit too bright. And it's a little bit blue. Her skin's going a bit of an odd colour. There we go. And we want it a little bit more in the cyan. There we go. So now we've got a very... You can see whilst it's not identical, we're clearly taking cues from our references still. Again, working from a reference doesn't mean you copy the reference exactly. But I like the model on the face here. I like the atmosphere of this shot. I like how pale the skin has gone. Might just bring the mids down ever so slightly. Because we've got a face in this shot, we want to make sure that the detail of the eyes in particular is very clear. The eyes are the most expressive part of the face. So we're really looking to make those clear and make this character relatable. Make it so that the viewer has an empathic connection to this character because she is the focus of the drama right now. So we want to try and avoid obscuring the eyes whenever possible. We typically want the eyes to be quite visible. And then we have a good match. This one might be a little bit bluer, so I might just grab that and take it towards green a little bit. I'm happy with that for first pass. So I'm going to go through. In fact, I'm going to take my still. And then in our group, I'm going to plug that in there. Cool. Tell you what I might just do. I think the skin's looking a little bit porcelain. I think I might just add an adjustment to bring up. There we go, just a little bit. Someone's gone a little bit yellow back there, so we'll fix that. But that's fine because it's quite a specific, unique colour. Might just bring a little bit of that colour down. That's also fixed some slightly odd shadows that we had in our main lead as well. And that's now brought that down. Cool. Right, so we'll fix the other wide. Then this clock. I don't know the story behind this shot. I don't know if it's stock, if it's a still. For whatever reason, it's awful. It's really too bright and really blown out, to the extent where when we start to bring it down, we don't get all of the detail of it back. But it's relatively easy to make it match. We just bring it all down and make sure that the color balance works. And then from there, we can still see that it was blown out at the time of capture, but it's a good enough match. It's only a little cutaway. Maybe we bring it down ever so slightly. There we go. So it's now there, and now it's not too... It was never going to match perfectly, but it's not interfering. It doesn't really jump out anymore, so that's fine. And then we're just going to keep going here. That's okay. We're going to bring these mids up a little bit because we're losing some face detail on the teacher there. And we're going to make sure we're not crushing the shadows too badly. And we might just increase the cyan tinge slightly. Make sure we maintain a nice clean black shadow though. These might be a little bit on the blue side, so I'll go back. There we go, that's much better. Now this is looking quite nice. And this is what's really good about Ari. I mean, this didn't take a great deal of work, and it's come out looking really quite nice in my opinion. And that's just Ari for you. Ari's, they just produce good footage. It's good stuff to work with. That's all there really is to it. Okay, so this is in the wrong group. We'll remove this from its current group. So this is kind of a transitional point. We're going from one location to the next where things get quite a bit darker and quite a bit more moody. So we have a decision. What we can do is we can establish that it's moody now, and we cut from here. We'll just put that on quickly. Cut from there to a much darker shot. Now it's not going to be that clean, especially with bits of the hair key and everything here. Or we can maintain the kind of a look that we've got going forwards, and then when we reach this area, there's still a bit of a transition. So what we're going to want to do is kind of make it a 50-50 split in this sequence, so that going into one and then into the other, it's not too jarring. We don't want a very sudden cut to a different look, which is what I talked about, making completely different looks for different scenes before. We've got some quite good coherent look development here, and we've decided that this better suits the atmosphere of what we're going for at this point. So then we've got these two shots to bridge that gap so that it doesn't go straight from one look to the next. And we're going to take a look at this, and what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to instate this look to begin with, and then I'm actually going to bring this up. So it's kind of a 50-50. It needs to be bluer. And then what I can do over the course of this shot, I think I'm going to keyframe it and make it get very slightly duller and duller. I'm also going to fix these blown out practicals in the background because they're bugging me. I'll just go back into the log wheel, set my high range to... I'm already doing something with high range. I'm going to go back into my log wheel. I'm going to set my high range quite high, and then I'm just going to bring it back down. In fact, I might actually just use a curve instead, because that gives me a bit more control. Cool. And then I'm going to take some highlight, some saturation out of the highlights, because they go a weird colour otherwise. Cool. So there are some deficiencies in the key that we have to deal with, like when we get to here. We can probably leave that for second pass. We'll just have a bit of a fiddle now, see what we can do. Okay, we have some warm props picking it up. What we want to make sure is we don't get any weird dancing noise. That note board has gone yellow, but it doesn't dance around, so that's okay. And we're getting pretty close to fixing the hair there. So I'd say for first pass that's okay. It does need more work. What I will do then, I'll put a flag on it. I'm going to put a yellow flag, and I'll come back to that in the second pass, knowing that there's a bit more work to do. I'm also going to put a cyan flag on there as well, because I've decided I'm going to keyframe the shot as as she kind of does the perp walk down here. We're going to get darker and darker, and then it's going to meet this shot quite nicely. So to that extent, I'm going to take a still as well. To that extent, I'm also going to do this. Now we have some problems in the top right. If you look closely, I'll just apply that. So up here we have weird cloudy bits which are going a bit wrong, so we'll see what we can do about those. And I have a feeling okay. We can probably balance that out with clean black and clean white, I think. And then we'll just go into closing radius 2, iterations 3. And we'll just blur that out a bit. So now, that's a pretty solid colour separation look. We just want to be careful, so we'll go back in the second pass, we'll put a yellow flag on that, because these were the two hardest shots to deal with in the original grade, although they took me a lot longer than this. So that's quite good. It fits into the previous shot. Then when we get here, I'm going to keyframe that so it gets darker and darker and darker, and then meets this scene here, and then we've got quite an effective transition between the two looks. We've not had a totally different look for two scenes. The lighting has changed and the atmosphere has changed, but we've conveniently got a bridge here, and then we've got that nice dark atmosphere in this scene, which I think is a much better fit than making it brighter, because this is where she realizes she's been stitched up and she's going to jail. Falsely accused of murder, I think. Cool, so I'm going to save. Now we have one or two shots hanging around that I can copy paste quite easily. That one just needs a little bit. In fact, to tell you what I'll do, I'm just going to turn the key of that key down, the key output down a little bit to about 50. And then I'm just going to make sure that we get that kind of dark feel. So it's foreboding, but it's not like the interrogation scene, it's not quite that dark, so that's fine. And now we have the bugbear of the whole project, these woodland shots. I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again, British woodland is not a great filming location. We have lots of very twiggy, scrubby trees, and all those little things mesh together and make a kind of natural diffraction grating in the sky, which means we get very diffuse light. We don't get a huge amount of model. We get a very kind of dusty-looking, kind of incoherent background. It's just not a great location to film in. That's just my opinion, is that British woodlands are a bit naff on camera. If you live somewhere with more interesting trees, like certain parts of America, good for you, but I have to make do with what we've got. And Canada, I suppose. Right, so let's get working on this one. This is probably a good master shot here. Right, so we're kind of going to go through another mini kind of look development phase. It's not going to take that long, because making secondaries here isn't a great idea, and also isn't really going to work. We're going to try and keep it simple. We're going to do our kind of keep to the primaries here. So we're just going to see what we can do. Now if I bring it down, it looks artificial. And this is kind of midday, so it's meant to look bleak, but I can't change the time of day here, so I need to be careful about that. Let's try and bring this down, make sure it doesn't go crazy. Okay, and let's just try and get ourselves in a decent starting location. It is, surprise, surprise, a bit purple. So we are just going to see if we can fix that. Okay, that looks like a fairly neutral winter's day to me, and this was shot probably October, November time, so getting into winter, although there's some green leaves there. So it might actually have been earlier in the year. Actually thinking about Jake's schedule, he would have been in post in October, November. Could have been July. Could have been filmed in July in that case. In which case some of the trees would be in leaf, or a lot of the trees would still be in leaf. So we've got a good standard neutral look, and we're going to go back to our reference and we're going to see if we can try and push it in this direction. We're not going to take the same approach we did last time because that doesn't work. That obviously didn't work. Right. Let's see what we can do here. I don't want the skin to go completely black and white, and I want that kind of steely look. So what I can do, I am going to want to take care of those greens though, because they are getting in the way a little bit. Tell you what I'll do, I'll see if I can bring the skin tones back a little bit. So we're starting to get there, we're starting to get a colder look. Okay, that's looking a lot better now. I might just go back and take the skin down a little bit. If we go between these two scenes, they have something in common. They have that kind of blue wash and faint skin tones in common. That's more like it. Cool, and that's looking better to me than the last version. That's looking a lot better to me than the last version, which wasn't looking very strong at all last time. So I'm happy with that look. Now this sequence is, the lighting is identical, so it's very simple to take one look and apply it to all shots. And the other angle should respond well to it. That's come out a bit clean, so what we'll do is we'll actually, tell you what, because it's a global thing, we'll just bring saturation down overall until we're about there, so it comes back a little bit. So the skin's right about there now. This green needs taken care of. A surprising amount of what we perceive as green is actually in the yellow part of the spectrum, don't forget, even when we've apparently tinted it blue. That's too much, so that's probably... There we go. We might just bring those highlights up a little bit. Might just bring those highlights down a smidge. And we'll go back to hue v hue, and we might just... There we go. Cool, that looks like a decent enough match for first pass. We'll come back in the second pass and we'll finesse that again. And then what we will do, we will take a still. And then we'll see how this shot takes that look. Okay, that's not a brilliant match, straight up. That would be a kind of acceptable day for night, I guess, but every now and again it's worth checking just what happens, because sometimes this actually comes up and looks really good. Okay, that looks a bit off, so what we'll do is we'll do a manual grade here. And the skin tones aren't looking as clean on this one. So we'll bring this down. I don't want to lose detail in the hood here. I'm going to take care of the greens in the background. And then take care of the saturation of the greens in the background. Okay, now that skin looks a little bit pink to me. It could stand to be a little bit yellower, so let's just... Let's see if we can bring it up as well, because it's not quite... As we bring up the skin tones, we're going to get the wood in the background going up as well, so... Okay, we can further work on that in the second pass, but for now that's looking pretty good. Right. That's fine. We don't want to lose too much detail on that tree, so we'll be careful. And we want it to just be a little bit cooler. We do want that skin tone, that red, to be brought down a little bit. Cool. And this is the wide, so we can copy and paste that there. Now we'll have to keyframe that, so I'm going to put a cyan flag on that one. I'll come back to that in the second pass. And this is an establisher. And we want a bit more of a rotation on the green. And we want it to be a bit darker as well, because we don't have any real shadows there. And then we need to go in and keyframe that. Actually, we'll bring that up a bit, because it can't be too dark. And then we'll have to keyframe this, so that it's more consistent. That's more like it. Cool, then we can check this one. That's perfect. Hands are redder than the face. Typically, we have more blood vessels close to the surface of the skin. That makes them red, especially in the cold. So that's okay. So now, we have a few callback shots later on. And we're pretty much there. We're approaching the end of first pass. Cool. So, we're just going to go through the remaining shots and we'll copy the appropriate looks onto them. That one's got a few problems with the mask, but we can fix that. Just need to bring up low sat and blur it right out. We'll do a clean white to plug the gaps on the... There we go. We've just dealt with the knife. That we've got earlier on in the bathroom scene, which is here. This is a different shot, or is this one in the bathroom scene? Cool. That might just need a bit of a tweak. Bring that down and we'll bring that up. The bathroom scene was quite bright, but we also need it to kind of gel in with everything else. Cool. So we are at the end of first pass on this project. That's gone fairly quickly, but we did have, remember, we had a much longer look development period this time. So we're going to come back. The next two passes probably aren't going to be as intensive as they were on previous projects. This is a longer project, and we're going to try and keep to our time limit, like it says in the download instructions. We're going to try and aim for a maximum of 8 hours here. There's probably another between 1.5 to 3 hours to go at this point, but we're going to go through, we're going to get everything matching up just so. We're going to do a proper look at all of our masks, make sure they're okay. Probably going to give another pass to the wood scene, and then we're going to do our keyframing and our fine match in this sequence as well. And then in the third pass, we're going to give everything one last check. Depending on how comprehensive the second pass is here, it may be that we don't really go through a full third pass. It might just be we do like a proof watch and then that'll be enough. But that's fine. So, click on through to the next lecture once you're ready.